How are we going to get this on? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachalane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today is the appearance day of Gadadhar Pandit, so we'll speak a little bit about that first of all. So Gadadhar Pandit is worshipable. Of course, in most of our temples we do not see that image of Gadadhar Pandit so much. Generally we see Nityananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as we see here in the temple here. There are some deities of Gaur Gadadhar, that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Gadadhar Pandit. In Bengal you'll see them. But in ISKCON we have more popularity with Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. In any case, we do have what we call the Pancha Tattva. Of course, that's also in Mayapur and in some other temples as well. So this is explained also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So generally we say, okay, worship, we have one Supreme Lord. Worship one Lord. There's not two lords, there's not five lords, there's not 20 gods or millions of demigods or whatever. What is that, 3 million demigods? There's not so many, there's only one Supreme Lord. So why do we start worshiping so many different entities, you know? And then because we do that, then people say, oh, you're a worshiper of so many gods. Whereas our religion, we only worship one God. It's much better. But as we see from reading Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita or any of our Gaudiya literatures or any Vaishnava literature, we all understand there's only one Supreme Lord. He may have many forms, definitely, but there's only one Supreme Lord. Now there is, of course, a little bit of a problem here because people will say, one Supreme Lord, we are believing in one God, you're believing in many gods. So that's the one misconception. But then when we speak about one God, so who's that God? And when we get into the details, then people will say, yes, there is a Supreme God, but we cannot describe him. We're not going to give him a form. Maybe we'll give him a place, but just no form. So we really can't describe him. What does he look like? We're not going to say anything. So the difference is that when we say, yes, God is there and there's one Supreme God, then we also give him a form. And we give him qualities, we give him activities, we give him a place. And we have many details of that. So that's one big difference that we have. So yes, we also believe in one God, like many religions of the world, but we believe in one God, but he also has form. Wonderful form. It's not a material form. So therefore you cannot attack it and say, well, all forms are temporary, etc., because it's the spiritual form which is eternal. So this is a difficulty that many religions have to even discuss that there is God has a form at all. God is there, but what is he? Don't quite know. So the Vedic literatures are more specific and they give God a form. But more than that, not only is there a struggle to give God a form, but we accept the form, but when we say that God has a form, the same one God has many forms. That's even more surprising. So it's not that we're worshiping many gods, we're worshiping one God, and he can have many forms like Nrsimhadev or Ramchandra or Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, etc. And he can be different forms, and he could be completely different forms. So we have Nrsimhadev with a lion head, and we have Varaha with a pig body, and we have Hayagriva with a horse, and like this, a fish and turtle, and very many remarkable forms. They're not even humanistic forms, huh? But all spiritual. So one God with many forms. Not why? Because he's God. He can do anything he wants. He can have many forms. It's not restricted to human being forms. There's so many other different forms that are there, and God can take many various forms, and one can have relationships with those forms. Just as in this world we have people, generally people with people, yeah? But then we have people with dogs. In fact, I think I heard that most people prefer their dog, friendship with their dog over friendship with another human being. I think in America and Western countries, 70% of the people prefer their dog over another human being. So you can just have, and some people, of course, are attached to their horses or their cats or whatever like this, or their birds or whatever like this. So in the spiritual world, you can have, fulfill that desire if you want. And you can worship the form of Nrsimhadev or Hayagriva or Matsya or Kurma or whatever. Yeah? And it's still one God, not many gods. Huh? So that's one point. That, not only that, you get so many various forms, and we're not confined to color. Yeah. So generally, we want gods, and God will have to have a specific color. We see this color or that color. No, it's every color. So as Krishna, he's bluish black. As Balaram, he's white. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is yellow. And as Yagya, he is red. As Ramachandra, he's green. So we have all sorts of colors, all sorts of forms, etc. And it's still one God. Huh? Well, there's great variety in that one God. So then the question will come, well, how does that God manifest into so many forms like that, whatever? Then we get the idea of Shakti. The Lord has his Shaktis. And this is a very fundamental concept in our Sampradaya particularly. We talk about the Shakti. Of course, it's there in other Vaishnava Sampradayas, but we give a great prominence to the idea of the Shakti and the Shaktiman. So the Shaktiman is Supreme Lord, like Krishna, and then we have the Shakti. Of course, there's many Shaktis. The Lord has many Shaktis, and then our Sampradaya will say actually three basic Shaktis: material Shakti, or Bahiranga Shakti, Jivas, Tatastha Shakti, marginal energy, and Antaranga Shakti, internal energy, or Sarup Shakti, or Chit Shakti. So we have three different types of energy of the Lord. So why does the Lord need these energies in the first place? So this is an explanation of if we have a Supreme Lord, how does he manifest anything? So we can say, well, it's like an artist or a potter. The potter's making pots, like that. So God is like the potter, and then he gets some clay and puts his hands and wets his hands up like this and starts molding the clay and puts it on a wheel and uses his feet and but we don't expect God to do something like that. Not so physical, because he's God, he can do anything. Of course, we can say, well, he can do it with his will. Let there be a material world and it will happen. But that's true. Yes, he can do everything by his will. He doesn't have to exert any energy. He doesn't exert any energy at all and do anything in the material world or the spiritual world. That's true. But still we say, well, how does he do that? How does the will manifest into the material creation and the spiritual world with the millions of spiritual planets and spiritual forms, etc., and all the jivas? How does he do that still, even if it's his will? So then we say Shakti. He has a potency. So God is there in his very self, and then he has his energy, his potency, his Shakti, which will do things. Which is just like we have in the material world to explain things. In science, they want to explain how things happen. Yeah? So then they say it's energy. So we have all sorts of different Shaktis in the material world, like gravity and whatever, and all these different things. So in the same way, the Supreme Lord, we can just explain it. How does he do all of this? So everything happens, of course, by his will, but practically speaking, through his Shaktis. And the Shaktis are under his will. But to accomplish it, then he does it through his Shaktis. So in this way, the material world has gone through his Shakti, his material energy Shakti like that, and creates material world, and the Lord doesn't have to do anything or become contaminated or touch it at all. Like the potter gets his hands dirty, he doesn't have to do anything. Just let the Shakti do everything. And similarly with the Jiva. We have Jivas in the material world in all sorts of sinful activity. The Lord doesn't have to touch that at all because he's separate. It's the Tatastha Shakti that operates like that and makes the Jiva, has the Jiva doing all these things. And in the spiritual world, then he has his Chit Shakti, spiritual Shakti. So this is the important Shakti of all the Shaktis. This is Chit Shakti, which is the most important. So it is through that Shakti that the Lord will manifest everything in the spiritual world. That's important because we're saying God has a form, qualities, activities. How does it happen? Shakti. How does the Dhamma exist? How does Goloka exist? How does Vaikuntha exist? By his Shakti. But it's not the Prakriti Shakti, that one, because that's material, not Chit. So he has this Chit Shakti, which will manifest everything. Spiritual bodies, spiritual place. The Lord is his own form, like Varaha, Nrsimha, Krishna, all through his Shakti. His qualities, his activities, all through his Shakti. So it's all through his Chit Shakti. So we hear also that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and Sandarbhas, how that Chit Shakti has, we can say, 3 divisions, basically. One is the Sandhini Shakti. So this is the Shakti that makes everything exist. How do we get a spiritual world? The Dhamma, Sandhini Shakti. How do these forms exist? Sandhini Shakti. How does the name exist? How does the Lord's name exist? Sandhini Shakti. How do the qualities exist? Sandhini Shakti. So everything in the spiritual world, existence of everything is through the Sandhini Shakti. If we don't have that, then nothing exists. So in other words, the Shakti is very important to go with the Lord. If there's a Lord without his Sandhini Shakti, what happens? Brahman. Impersonal Brahman. No form, no qualities, no activities. Just state of existence. And even the consciousness, what are you conscious of? Nothing. There's nothing to be conscious of in Brahman state. There's no other object. So even that Chit is quite, you'd say, minimized, because there's no awareness of a thing. It's only awareness. So it's very non-functional almost. So therefore that Sandhini Shakti manifests everything in the spiritual world, including the forms, qualities, activities of the Lord. So when we talk about Bhagavan, then necessarily we need that Sandhini Shakti to cause manifestation of the Lord, etc. But if we have everything in the spiritual world, we have the forms there and the trees and everything. There's Krishna and his flute and even the other associates there. Then very fine. But then they exist. But then how do they interact with each other? How do they perceive each other? We say, because they're conscious. Yeah. So this is where the Samvit Shakti operates. We have consciousness in the material world, yes? We're conscious, and we're conscious in any state. But in the material world, all covered up with ignorance. And we cannot perceive form of Krishna, spiritual world or anything. So that Samvit Shakti is not operating. Certainly the consciousness is there, but it's not seeing anything spiritual. It's seeing everything material. Material bodies. We don't even see the soul. But in the spiritual world, the jivas and the Supreme Lord perceive each other and develop relationships. All this is the Samvit Shakti of the Lord. How does the consciousness operate? Through the Samvit Shakti of the Lord. All the relationships are established, and you can see. We have the you can see with your eye in the spiritual world because you got a spiritual body. If you don't have this Samvit Shakti, then you couldn't see anything. If you had a body, you have a spiritual body due to the Sandhini Shakti, and you have eyes and ears. But if the Sandhini Shakti is not operating, you can't see anything. You can't hear Krishna's flute. So you need that the Samvit Shakti operating also. So the spiritual perception, awareness is there, and whatever senses can operate in the spiritual world. So that goes for all the jivas in the spiritual world and for Supreme Lord himself. And then we have the third aspect of that Shakti in the spiritual world, the Chit Shakti or the Swarup Shakti. And what is that? That is the Hladini Shakti. So definitely things must exist in the spiritual world to have forms, qualities, variety. Then we have to have consciousness and awareness of everybody. But then we also got to have an experience of what? Bliss. We don't want to experience lamentation, obviously. So the experience, all experience in the spiritual world is experience of bliss. Huh? So then, how does that bliss? How does that operate? Huh? And that's the Hladini Shakti of the Lord. So the Lord's essential nature is bliss. This is, of course, fundamental to the Upanishads. I say, what is ultimately Brahman? It is bliss. So therefore, the nature of Bhagavan is bliss. But then, how does he experience the bliss? So that's through the Hladini Shakti. How does the jiva in the spiritual world experience the bliss? Through the Hladini Shakti. So therefore, these are the three aspects of the internal energy or the Chit Shakti, which are necessary in order that we get the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan, and all of the jivas who serve him, carrying out pastimes, developing rasa, and getting bliss. So that's why the Shakti is necessary. So of those three aspects of Shakti, then the main aspect of Shakti, of course, is the Hladini Shakti. That's the essence of the Lord. So that's very integral to the Supreme Lord. And therefore, when we have the Supreme Lord, we must have his Hladini Shakti there. So that's represented by Krishna and Radha, or Vishnu and Lakshmi, like that. So that's why we have the Shakti there, because it's the essential part of the Lord. So sometimes we say that Shakti and the Lord are, the Shakti is dependent on the Lord, obviously. And the Shaktiman is a possessor of the Shakti, that's Krishna. But yet, somehow the Shakti becomes more important than the Shaktiman, because we see that Radha controls Krishna. In order to get Krishna's mercy, we need Radha's mercy. So we get Radha's mercy, then Radha's will influence Krishna for us, and then we get Krishna's mercy. So Radha is, even though it's a Shakti and subservient to Krishna, more important. Yeah, let's say ontologically speaking or philosophically speaking, obviously the Shakti is dependent upon the Shaktiman. So Krishna is the central figure, he is Bhagavan, and his Shakti is Radha. So he takes a male form and she takes a female form. So that exists in the spiritual world. So we have Radha and Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears, and he's a very different type of form. We can say he's avatar in one sense, but actually we also call him avatari, like Krishna. Krishna is the source of all the avatars, because he includes all the avatars plus has extra qualities. So that's why we call him avatari, the source of the avatars. Not in time because they're all eternal, but because he is full manifestation, therefore he's avatari. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the same. He is not some offshoot that manifests partial qualities. He's also full. He is Krishna. So he's also avatari. So he's very special. He's not just an avatar, Yuga avatar. He's not just a Yuga avatar like the Yuga avatars. The other Yuga avatars, and Treta Yuga and Satya Yuga and Dwapara Yuga, are usually expansions from the Manvantara avatar, who's an expansion from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So they're expansions. But when Krishna comes, he is avatari. Yeah? And then when Lord Chaitanya comes, he's also like Krishna. So they're not expansions. They're very, very special. So Chaitanya was very special, but then he's not if he's supposed to be non-different from Krishna, why doesn't he look like Krishna? And he doesn't. He doesn't act like Krishna. He does not have the same activities as Krishna. He's completely different. Color is completely different. He's golden, and Krishna is bluish black. So they're quite different. And Krishna shows his remarkable powers by killing demons and lifting up Govardhan Hill, doing all these different activities. Lord Chaitanya doesn't kill any demons. What does he do? Kirtan. He just does kirtan. Hears Bhagavatam, preaches Bhagavatam, and does kirtan. That's Lord Chaitanya's activity. And through that, he accomplishes whatever Krishna accomplishes. Krishna kills the demons and takes them to the spiritual world, or liberates them, whatever. Lord Chaitanya does kirtan. And then he liberates the demons, makes them into devotees, and then they go to the spiritual world. So he's like Krishna, we're going to say even more merciful, because he doesn't even have to kill the demon before they go to the spiritual world. He doesn't kill any demons. But nevertheless, they end up in the spiritual world. They get prema. So he's like Krishna, but even more merciful. And he's said to have the mercy of, or let's say, he takes up the mood of Radha. So that's how he's different from Krishna. So Krishna displays all his wonderful activities in Goloka or in Vrindavan. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes up the mood of Radha. So therefore he cannot act like Krishna and do the same things because he got the mood of Radha. So that's the difference between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. He has that mood, so he's like, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is like Radha Krishna combined, which we can say is even better. So we have Krishna and Radha in the spiritual world, then we have Radha Krishna combined, so that's even better. He's the avatar, plus he's got Radha mixed up inside him also, so even more merciful. He's Krishna, who's very merciful, and then we have Radha mixed up and who's more merciful, and then we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who's more merciful again. So then we got a very good combination of mercy. So he's called, instead of calling him Madhurya, we call him Audarja, most merciful, or Mahavadanya. So we have our prayer, Mahavadanya means very generous, most generous. So he's more generous than even Krishna. Because he has that mood of delivering everybody. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, he comes in the mood of Radha, so therefore he takes the role of the devotee. So we call him Bhakta Rupa in our Panchatattva mantra, Bhakta Rupa. He is the Lord who takes the form of a devotee and acts like a devotee experiencing prema for Krishna. Takes the mood of Radha and he worships Krishna. And then we have Nityananda, who's his expansion or Sarupa. We have Advaitacharya, who's avatar form, that is Purusha avatar, Mahavishnu. We have the Bhakta, the Jiva form, that is Srivas Pandit. And then we have Shakti, that is Gadadhar Pandit. So Gadadhar Pandit is the Shakti of the Supreme Lord. Just as we have Radha with Krishna, so with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna with the mood of Radha. Then we have his Shakti, Gadadhar, who also acts like a devotee, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we call Bhakti Shaktikam. So that is the nature of Gadadhar. So therefore, just as we worship Radha and Krishna, then we can also worship Gaur and Gadadhar in the same way. They're very, very similar. But the difference is that we have explicit pastimes between Radha and Krishna in the spiritual world, which is the essence of the spiritual world, the highest tattva, presented in Bhagavatam, and it is Madhurya Rasa. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is covered over. He has got the mood of Radha for Krishna, so he cannot act like Krishna anymore. So Lord Chaitanya does not do the same activities of Krishna, like have Ras Leela and lift Govardhan Hill and kill demons, etc. It's quite different because he is acting as the Bhakta. He is Bhakta Rupa. So similarly, Gadadhar Pandit also does the same thing. Does not show activities of Radha explicitly. Okay? So both take the form of devotees and participate mainly in the Sankirtan movement, chanting the holy name. That's their main activity, to deliver the fallen souls. And what are they delivering? Love of Radha and Krishna. So ultimately it's said that the kirtan of Navadvip is equivalent to the Ras Leela. Because through that kirtan you can enter into the Ras Leela, which means you can get to Madhurya Rasa, highest aspect of Madhurya Rasa in the spiritual world, through kirtan in Navadvip. So, instead of displaying activities like Krishna and Radha and Krishna, Gaur and Gadadhar manifest activities as devotees doing kirtan. So that's their main activity. Nevertheless, we will see indications of why we will identify Gadadhar as Radha. So we see, for instance, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and in Gaur Ganodesh Deepika of Kavi Karnapura, there's a whole identity. Nityananda is Balaram, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, Gadadhar is Radha, Srivas Pandit is Narada Muni, and then we go on. So all the associates of Nityananda are cowherd boys, etc. like this. So we get a whole identification of everybody in Lord Chaitanya's pastime with people in Krishna's pastimes, like that. How does that take place? How do the Kavi Karnapura and others identify? Because there's some indications in the pastimes of Gauranga which will indicate similarity. Obviously we get similarity between Gauranga's parents, so that's like Nanda and Yasoda, Jagannath Mishra and Sachi. So they're like Yasoda and Nanda because parents, so some are obvious. And then we get Nityananda as like the elder brother of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so Balaram, like that. And we'll see they act like in a very friendly manner, just as Krishna and Balaram are very friendly in Vrindavan. So similarly with the Gadadhar Pandit, then we also get some indications of why Gadadhar Pandit is identified as Radha. So what are these symptoms? Gadadhar Pandit was always very attached to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, and then we see he was so attached he could not separate from him, and he went to Puri with him. Whereas Nityananda did not stay with him, Advaitacharya didn't stay with him, Srivas Pandit didn't stay with him, no one else stayed with him. Everyone went back to Navadvip, stayed there. But Gadadhar Pandit never separated from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and stayed with him in Puri. So this is one indication. There's many other indications also. So when they were in Navadvip together, then Gadadhar Pandit was very close to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and would always be serving him very, very closely. And they're always, you can say, inseparable there. So these are indications of that Gadadhar Pandit is identified as Radha. So, but as I say, everything is covered up, and the main activity is the activity of Sankirtan and delivering all the jivas to Radha and Krishna, ultimately. So we'll have descriptions of how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed his kirtan. Nightly they would do kirtan in various places in Navadvip, including Srivas Pandit's place. And then all the associates would be there, and Gadadhar Pandit would be there. And they would have all these different pastimes, kirtan pastimes that they would do. And always Gadadhar Pandit would be involved in the singing and the dancing, as was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That was their activity. And it's through that activity that they were able to deliver all the fallen souls of Navadvip. And then later in Puri we see that Gadadhar Pandit stayed there with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, could never be separated from him. When Lord Chaitanya wanted to leave, then Gadadhar Pandit wanted to go with him, but then Lord Chaitanya said, no, we have to stay here in Puri. So, nevertheless, Gadadhar Pandit followed the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and stayed there in Puri, and was always absorbed in serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and absorbed in the Bhagavatam. So it was the story of Srinivasacharya before he became famous, when he was just a young man who was there, but like it's another generation. So after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disappeared, then this is when Srinivasacharya was growing up at that time. And then he regretted, well, why couldn't I have been born a little earlier so I could participate in the Navadvip pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but now he's gone. Anyway, he thought, okay, I'll go to Puri because Gadadhar Pandit is there. So he went to Puri, and there he met Gadadhar Pandit, who was not very happy because he was in separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who had disappeared already. So the Gadadhar Pandit was very happy to see Srinivasacharya because he could see by his symptoms of his body that he was a very saintly person. And actually it was the will of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he carry on the preaching movement. So Gadadhar Pandit became very enthusiastic and happy to meet him. And he wanted to give him good instructions. And then he showed him his Bhagavatam, which of course is written on palm leaf manuscript. Palm leaf. Must have been huge, like many, many stacks of palm leaves. But then he showed him the work, and then Srinivasacharya saw that he couldn't read anything. Why? Because Gadadhar Pandit would cry when he recited the Bhagavatam or heard the Bhagavatam. So his tears fell all over the manuscript, and all the letters had disappeared because of his tears. So he requested Srinivasacharya, I'll teach you Bhagavatam, but you have to go back and get some new copy. So then Srinivasacharya had to go back to Bengal and get a copy of the Bhagavatam, come back later on. So that was the intensity of Gadadhar's involvement in pastimes of Krishna. He was constantly absorbed in these pastimes. Unfortunately, what happened is he went back to Bengal, and then he got the book, and then he came back. And on their way back, then people were coming up from Puri, and said, what's the news? And then they said, well, Gadadhar Pandit's disappeared. So then he had his Bhagavatam, but there was no Gadadhar Pandit, so he went back to Bengal after that. When he got back to Bengal, then they said, well, Nityananda's disappeared, and Advaita's disappeared also. Nothing. So what to do? So then he went to Vrindavan, and then he studied under the Jiva Goswami there. So anyway, he got the mercy of Gadadhar Pandit, and he realized his Gadadhar Pandit was, so attached to Krishna, and so intense was his devotion to Krishna that the Bhagavatam disappeared due to its tears. It was wiped out. So this was the nature of Gadadhar Pandit, very, very intensely devoted to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and from that we realize that he is non-different from Radha. But he didn't, of course, manifest explicitly the nature of Radha in the pastimes, because he's covered, just as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not Krishna. He's also covered over and doesn't display explicitly his activities as Krishna. Okay, anyway. Any question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for the very wonderful class. And thank you for the ontological descriptions of all the Shaktis of the Lord. So while you were describing about the Sandhini, Samvid and the Ladini Shakti, the soul is Satchit Ananda, Sat Chit. So their Chit is full of knowledge, is referred to full of knowledge. So just wanted to ask that, because the soul cannot be as knowledgeable as Krishna is. So what does that full of knowledge in the Chit, the Sat Chit Ananda, that Chit, the full of knowledge is what? Is it like limited knowledge, or how much full knowledge? Can you describe?
Yeah. So we say that Jiva is Satchitananda, but actually if we look at the jivas in the material world, they're not Satchidananda, because if they had Ananda, they wouldn't be here. They would be in the spiritual world, wouldn't they? If they had Chit, they would realize Krishna, but we don't see Krishna directly. Okay? So, yes, the potential is there to manifest that, and we have the dull reflection of all that in the material world, where we have the jiva existing, and over that we got a material body existing, that's sat. And we do have knowledge because the consciousness is showing through our ahankara and our intelligence in our mind, and then we learn material things, so we got material knowledge, jnana, and then we have our happiness of the material world, which is a dull reflection of the ananda in the spiritual world, but obviously got nothing to do with the jiva. It's a fake ananda manufactured in your mind, etc., and given back to the jiva, and the jiva think, oh, this is bliss, but actually isn't. So it's all very potential at this stage, the Satchidananda. The jiva is there, and the potency is there, but it doesn't really develop unless we perform bhakti and attain prema. So, bhakti, actually, its main element is also ananda. If you go to the Nectar Devotion there, when it talks about bhava, then it talks about the Visheshatma, Visuddha Visheshatma manifests in bhava stage. And then our acharyas say that means Hladini and Samvit Shaktis. Manifest in the jiva, in bhava stage. Why? Because through the Samvit, then you can perceive the Lord. So in bhava stage, you see the Lord. You cannot see the Lord with the material eyes, so you need the Shakti, so the jiva gets the Samvit Shakti to perceive the Lord. And then you can't experience the bliss unless you got the Hladini Shakti there. So then bhava means, obviously sthayi bhava means you get a bhava and it mixes and you get ananda. So unless these two aspects are not there in the jiva, in bhava stage, then you can't experience Krishna and get the bliss. So that's where the ananda and the chit manifest really for the jiva, when you get bhava. But before that, it's all covered over. So these are eternal. It says they are nitya siddha. So they anything spiritual energy should be eternal. It's not material. So obviously eternal because they're with Krishna. There is internal Shakti, and all the people in the spiritual world are inundated with that. And then the jiva, when it comes to bhava and gets prema, particularly in prema, then that hladini and samvit become fixed in the jiva also. And then he cannot fall into the material world again. And the jivas in the material world don't have that samvit and hladini shakti. Yes, they are tatasya shakti, potency is there, but they don't have that element of the internal energy that mixes and enforces them so they can stay in the spiritual world.
So just wanted to clarify one thing, is about the Nitya Siddhas, the devotees who are in the spiritual world, when they become liberated and go back to the Golok Vrindavan. So the jiva is, so that means the jiva is not completely cognizant, because chit means cognizant, like Krishna is completely cognizant. So here the jivas can never become completely cognizant, is it?
In the spiritual world?
In the spiritual world?
Well, no one can compare to Krishna at all. He is the ultimate everything. He is all knowledge of everything in the spiritual world. By his mercy, the jiva can do remarkable things. So he can be aware of anything by the mercy of Krishna. So he can develop remarkable potency. So we say one of the aspects of mukti is sharshti, which means you can get all sorts of powers, power of knowledge or whatever like that. You can know, but it's ultimately dependent on Krishna. Again, by the will of the Lord, he doesn't give everybody everything, or as he covers it over. That's his yogamaya potency. So that By yoga maya, you're aware of some things and not aware of other things in the spiritual world. And what's the purpose of that? So that there can be pastimes. Otherwise, if you're aware of everything, whenever anything happens, well, I already know that. I already know that. Oh, Krishna's going out with the cows still. I already know what's going to happen. So there's no suspense, there's no rasa at all. So things get covered over or limited in the jivas and the spiritual, but it's not material maya. It's the yoga maya potency operate to restrict the jiva for development of pastimes and rasa.
Krishna Maharaj. So as we were explaining about Tatastha Shakti, and we read in a 10th canto in one purport where Yashoda Mai binds Krishna, Prabhupada explains that some jivas, like Mother Yashoda and other, they are expansion of internal potency.
What?
They are expansion of internal potency, like Yashoda Maya, Nand Baba and all the Brajvasis. And then you are explaining that we here marginal, internal and external.
Yeah.
So there are some souls who are expansions of internal potency, and
Yes.
we are
Yeah.
Tatastha Shakti.
Yeah.
So what exactly is the meaning of Tatastha Shakti? Means we were in spiritual realm with Krishna like Nand Baba and other Brajvasis, and then we came here. What's the difference between the soul who are expansion of internal potency and those who are the marginal?
Well, those who are expansions of internal potency, we don't call them jivas. They're like Radha is not a jiva, for instance. She's Shakti Tattva. So they're not an infinitesimal jiva like that. They're in a special category. So the jivas all arise from the jiva Shakti or the Tatastha Shakti, whatever, and by nature they are anu, small particles. But as I said, if they have the Hladini and Samvit Shaktis combined, then they stay in the spiritual world. If they don't have that, then they're in the material world. So you get two types, the Nityabadas and Siddhas, as a result of that. So the Shaktis are like the Jivas in one sense, but with a little more special because they're Shakti, they're part of the internal energy, not part of the Jiva Shakti. They're part of the Chit Shakti, or the, let's say the Hladini Shakti or whatever like that, they can be. So therefore, we have Radharani and then her expansions or whatever. So they're in a special category, which is, let's say, very close to Krishna. So we cannot become the Shakti. We cannot become a Shakti Tattva from a Jiva Tattva. We cannot change our nature.
Hare Krishna. I have a question on, you mentioned three Shaktis, Antaranga Shakti, Swarup Shakti and Chit Shakti. So are they one and the same? And then you have divided Chit Shakti into Sandhini, Samvit and Hladini Shakti.
What is the same you're saying? What are they saying?
Antaranga Shakti, Swarup Shakti and Chit Shakti. Are they one and the same?
Swarup Shakti, Chit Shakti, Antaranga Shakti, internal energy, all the same.
So specifically this Chit Shakti, is it consciousness? What is that?
No, the Chit Shakti means spiritual in that sense.
Spiritual consciousness?
Yeah. And then within that, then we can say we have the three divisions, Hladini, Samvit, and Sandhini, which are Sat, Chit, Ananda, basically. Hladini is Ananda, the Chit aspect is Sandhini, or Samvit, and the Sat aspect is the Sandhini. Within the spiritual energy, or the Chit Shakti, or the Swarup Shakti.
I'll ask one more question. It's about, I'd like to know what is Shuddha Sattva and what is Vishuddha Sattva?
What is Visuddha Sattva?
Yeah, what is Shuddha Sattva and Vishuddha Sattva? What is it?
Suddha and Visuddha are the same thing, which means spiritual, not material, basically. Because when we say Sattva, then that's actually material Sattva gun is aspect of Prakriti. It's material. Then when we say Visuddha Sattva or Suddha Sattva, then we mean spiritual Sattva. Spiritual, well, of course, everything is Sattva in the spiritual world. Everything is wonderful in the spiritual world. But it's not like material Sattva, which is an aspect of Prakriti.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. As you mentioned that Shaktiman is Krishna and he has various Shakti through which he manifests spiritual world and material world. And you also mentioned that even Lord Krishna's name, his form, attributes, they are also means manifestation of Sandhini Shakti. So, but means we understand Shaktiman, Krishna, as the holy name. Holy name is Krishna, and the form of Krishna is also Krishna. So, if these name, form, qualities, they are manifestation of Sandhini Shakti, then who is Krishna means? Who is Shaktiman?
Oh, yeah. So Shaktiman is there, the possessor of the Shakti, and the Shaktis are dependent upon him. But when we come to that spiritual energy, the Sarup Shakti or Chit Shakti, whatever, then we have the Sandhini Shakti manifesting name, form, qualities, activities. We also say that the Shakti and the Shaktiman are non-different. So therefore, the name, qualities, form, activities of the Lord are non-different from the Lord. Even though the Shaktiman is different from the Shakti, we also say they're non-different. So it's difference in non-difference. So the name is different from the Lord, but it's also same as the Lord.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very much for inspirational class. Maharaj, just sub question to this question, that how one can prove that person is greatest, not Shakti.
What's that?
What Shaktiman is more important, as Advaitvad says that the both are same. So everything is Shakti only, and because of Shakti everything is manifesting in spiritual world.
What? That's who says that? Durga followers, Kali followers, is it? Yeah, well, these are the Shaktas. They believe that Shakti is supreme, so they worship Durga or Kali or whatever like this, huh?
Yes.
Mumbai Devi also said, yeah, whatever. Anyway, Parvati, whatever. Shakti is supreme. So there are people that believe that. Of course, we find even in ancient primitive religions, we have the same thing. Worship of the mother goddess or whatever was very prominent in Europe in the ancient times, in the caveman times, they were worshiping the mother goddess, supreme whatever. Many civilizations have the mother goddess as a supreme entity. There's nothing wrong with that in one sense. So we say Jagannatha, mother of the world. So, but then we say that as ultimately Radha, or Lakshmi is mother of the world, mother of the universe. So non-material, whereas when we take Durga Devi, etc., then that's the wife of Shiva. So this is on a lesser level. So we want to go to the highest level, and then we say that we have the top, the spiritual Shakti there in the form of Radharani or Lakshmi. So we put them on a higher level. And yes, they are ultimately, the Shakti is subservient to the Shaktiman, but then, as I said, often Krishna is subservient to Radha. So then, again, Radha is supreme.
So these kind of people, they have this conception that Shakti is greatest. So how they can convince that devotional service is also important?
Well, we have to go back to Scripture and base everything on Scripture. So we go through all the Puranas and the Upanishads and everything, and then we'll find out that ultimately, Shiva is there, and Parvati is there, but higher than that is Vishnu and Lakshmi, and higher than that is Radha and Krishna. And we have to go by Scripture.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, one more question, that you are mentioning that three Shaktis are doing means all the manifestation in spiritual world. Similarly, are there three qualities of material modes? They are doing manifestation of this material creation. Is that like?
Are they like?
Means you are mentioning in spiritual world, Sannidhi Shakti is doing manifestation of everything.
Okay, yeah.
And there are Aladini Shakti and Samit Shakti.
Yeah.
They are working in cooperation so that spiritual.
Well, yeah, they have their reflections in this material world. So the aspect of sat in the material world is
Goodness.
14 worlds. From, Brahmaloka to Patalaloka. This is the existence aspect with the material bodies. And then the chit aspect is awareness. So we get, as human beings, we get higher knowledge and we get jnana, knowledge, material knowledge, like that. And then we get our experience of happiness, material sukha, which is temporary and mixed with lamentation. So it's all a reflection of Satchidananda in the spiritual world. It's all temporary.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So maybe we have to end here, okay? Hare Krishna.